Welcome to season 2 of Fractional CMOs and the 90-Day Win. I'm Dean Way. This season, we're going to talk through scenarios that companies and these CMOs have experienced to share lessons learned and tips on how to get the most out of a fractional CMO that you hired. Hi, Neeti.
Hi, Dean. How are you?
Good, thank you. Okay, so the main sort of concept of this podcast, right? You just started a 1-year fractional engagement. Today is day 1. We're going to talk about the first 90 days. First off, right from the jump, what problem do you normally see when you start a new engagement with a client, or what problem do you just go looking for? Because you know it's going to be there, even if the company hasn't seen it yet. And maybe before you answer that, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So my name is Neeti Patel. I'm a fractional CMO. I work mostly with private equity investors and their B2B SaaS portfolio companies to unlock growth. The story really repeats itself across these clients. They have very little marketing infrastructure. They don't have a ton of strategic direction, but they're expected to grow very quickly. So my company, Mosaic, comes in and really helps guide them to be able to scale successfully. And I would say the number one problem I look for when I come into a new engagement is just how aligned the executive team is around what success looks like. A lot of these companies have a lot of pressure to grow very quickly, but when you start digging under the surface, you realize that your chief technology officer has a very different view of how success is going to be achieved versus your chief product officer and your chief marketing officer. And so I really like to sit down with the executive team and get them to explicitly define their growth vision, which includes what does success look like, how will it be measured, and how will it be achieved? Specifically, what growth levers is your organization going to invest in to achieve success? And it turns into very lively conversations and a lot of debate. But I think taking the time up front to really gain a clear understanding of where the company is going and get very explicit buy-in to that as kind of the North Star is really, really important.
And Alexander, hi. Welcome.
Hi, Dean. I'm Alexander Ferenczi. I'm a fractional CMO. I work with clients who want to grow their revenue and use digital marketing to do it. So advertising on social networks, advertising on search engines, and pretty much anywhere that's not one of those two. I started in all of this by working for Gary Vaynerchuk over at VaynerMedia. A lot of people have heard of Gary V, and branched out from there. So much, very similar to what Neeti just said. Starting in a 1-year engagement, first problem that I'm looking to tackle is alignment and measurement. So ensuring that all the leaders and departments are aligned towards the same business goal and objective that's going to move the organization forward in that same direction. Many times people assume that they're working on the same goals, but they define them completely different. So when you actually bring everybody to a room and sort of have that conversation, right, like Neeti, it erupts in a debate and it can be tense for a little bit, but you kind of got to get through that rough patch to be able to really have a fruitful conversation on what the future looks in store. And of course, measurement as well, ensuring that everyone on the team is tracking against the same business metrics that will lead to the most efficient funnel, model, acquisition strategy, or whatever buzzword is the colloquial for that organization. My first 30 days of any engagement are filled with meetings to get that alignment and clarity on what the organization is currently measuring, how to make it more efficient at garnering prospects, qualifying those leads, nurturing those to an opportunity, and then closing them into deals. So figuring out what that mechanism is going to look like and the best way of tracking against that.
All right, so let's sort of stay in that vein for a second. When I ask the next question, it's everyone often tries to give me the first initial answer because it is the most important answer. And the question is, besides sharing information, so let's take that as a given. Like, what does a CEO do, or what should a CEO do to get maximum value out of a fractional CMO that they've just started an engagement with? Or if you prefer to answer it the other way, how do CEOs or companies normally waste the money that they spent on a fractional CMO?
Yeah. So I'll say it starts off with two sort of just core pillars or mindsets, if you will. It's buy-in and trusting the process. If at a bare minimum, that's what the CEO should be doing. The reason is if the CEO is looking to hire a fractional CMO, they need to allow that individual to execute on their proposed strategy If not, you're simply overpaying for an implementer at that point. So you're not going to really get much value out of that. You're just executing the desired strategy, which may or may not work. And oftentimes, in my experience, what the CEO thinks may work will not work in reality, just because of limitations of what technology actually allows marketing to do in today's landscape. So getting that buy-in and trust. Of course, though, CEOs or founders, the companies are their babies, it's their children, so they're extremely protective over it. So they should voice their goals for what a fractional CMO is contracted to do. And oftentimes I draw lines directly in the sand with clear expectations from the jump with an SOW. But once that is clearly defined, the CEO should allow the fractional CMO to take the reins, sort of give them the rope. They'll either swing with the rope or they're going to hang themselves with that rope, but allow them to have that rope. And of course, with guardrails. So check-ins to ensure that changes are still moving the business in the right direction. Right. But it comes to sort of an analogy of, do you want an interior designer or do you want furniture movers? Meaning, are you hiring someone to design and stage your home appropriately for certain aesthetics and certain feelings that you want in the home? Or have you already decided what the furniture is, and now you're just saying, hey, I bought all this furniture from Restoration Hardware. Now I just need you to move it into the spots of my home that you think it fits best. You're already giving them a handcuff and a limitation. So the outcome itself is going to be limited as well.
Neeti, what do you think? How do companies waste the money that they?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree very much with what Alexander is saying. I think you really need to embrace the CMO as part of your executive team, and in order to build that trust and that alignment, really the CMO needs to be a part, I think, of core discussions that are happening within the organization. So, strategic planning discussions and decision-making process and prioritization calls. I mean, these things are not specific to marketing, but I think in order to get things done within the organization, you kind of need alignment across the executive team on what's important and what we're going to invest in. And if marketing is one of those levers, which sounds like it is if you're hiring a CMO into your organization, I think everyone needs to believe in that. And everyone needs to, I like what Alexander said, trust the process. And I think it's hard to gain that trust and the authority without really becoming a part of the DNA in the organization. And so I always encourage CEOs to, add us to meetings so that we can listen in on what's going on at the organizational level. I think, the pitfall there, and Alexander touched upon it, is to have very clear lines in the sand of what you are not going to do. But I never think there's, you said information sharing. I think that comes in a lot of different ways. And I think, listening in on conversations among leaders, you get a lot of information that is very valuable to help shape a marketing strategy that's going to support the organization's overall success.
All right, Neeti, let's get off the executive level for a second and go like a layer below. So let's say a peer or a friend of yours is also a fractional CMO and they've just signed their first ever engagement. Okay. And they're about to walk into a company where there's already a marketing team. There's not marketing leadership necessarily, but there's junior folks and there's mid-level folks. Like, what's the main piece of advice you would give to that person so they don't like mess it up as they walk in and there's a team in place?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the number one thing to keep in mind is that you are a marketing expert, but not a company expert. Mm-hmm. So the folks that are there, regardless of how long they've been there, have been there longer than you have and have seen things and tried things and oftentimes had really good ideas that just never took off because they didn't have the right buy-in, they didn't have the bandwidth, they couldn't get the executive team to agree. And so I would advise anyone going into an organization for the first time to do a lot of listening. I think, Alexander touched upon it, set up one-on-one calls, really listen to what people have been working on, where their challenges are, where their barriers are. And I like to ask a question of everyone that I meet. If you had, unlimited budget, unlimited buy-in, unlimited time, what are the projects that you would focus on? Because I know everyone has those 2 or 3 things they've identified but put on a shelf because they just don't have time to do it. And I love hearing the answers we get from them. A lot of times it helps shape kind of my path forward as well, as opportunities to drive growth where the team is really excited and engaged.
Alexander, what about you? What's your main lesson to give to someone who's walking into an existing marketing team?
Yeah, I echo the same sentiment where listening is key. I mean, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So let's use our ears more than we use our mouth at the start to just really get a gauge on what is happening. My advice is be open and friendly to reap those details from the existing marketing team. But you also want to be firm and hold a position of authority just so that the existing marketing team is aware that you are driving this ship. So it's a delicate balance of being open and friendly to reap those details, but you don't want to become too friendly where at that point you're not going to get buy-in from the existing marketing team, or they just won't execute and they'll lollygag on the actions that you're telling them to do on a weekly sprint or monthly sort of progress report. So hosting meetings with all the members to understand their role on paper, as well as their role that's outside of their job description. Because many times when there is not a marketing leader, and let's say you're hiring a social media marketer, that individual is now doing 10 other things, which is not on the job description. And it's imperative to know what that is so you can utilize them for what they're intended to do and what they have some experience in that's outside of essentially their scope of work with the company client team. Also ask them about their professional and personal aspirations and how you as a fractional CMO are going to help them achieve that and the changes you're going to bring to the organization. It's imperative to create allies when you're coming into an organization and not enemies. So figuring out what motivates them, what are their drives, what are their ambitions, and that your goals for this company will help them achieve those personal and professional achievements as well. But like I said, you got to remain firm. So when it comes to new engagement, not only do I meet with all the existing marketing team members that are in-house, but I'll also review vendor contracts and sit on those vendor meetings. And leaning into that sort of listening as a focus at the start, I'm not really looking to make a massive change in the first 2 weeks, but just really understand how the current workflow goes into its natural state, and then begin to shake things up where I see where it's going wrong and where the quick fixes could be. It can be very tough to bite your tongue in meetings that you know are a disaster, but by seeing the mess and assessing how everyone else around you that is integral to or in-house to the organization behaves around it is going to allow you to have the clarity to see where the fat is and where you could trim that fat, as opposed to jumping in from the 10 seconds of this meeting is a dumpster fire, kind of let it play out.
Yeah. If the podcast ever gets a historian, I think this episode will be marked as the first time anyone said the word lollygag. So yeah, it's a little something there. Okay, then let's go sort of like one layer deeper than that. Okay. So let's say you're one of those junior or mid-level folks, and you heard last week that, let's say it's Sunday, you heard last week that the company was bringing in a fractional CMO, right? You went to Google to find out what the hell that was.
Yeah.
You heard about CMOs, but you don't know what a fractional CMO is, right? And so like now you're looking at, it's Sunday, you're looking at Monday next week. This person's about to start, right? Tomorrow morning's the big thing. Like, what, as that employee, what sort of changes or what should you be expecting to see, especially in that first week when that fractional CMO comes in? We'll start with Alexander and then we'll switch over to Neeti.
Yeah, so I would say it kind of depends on the organization and the role of of each specific full-time employee. But I would say if you're a tire kicker that is doing the bare minimum to get by, you're blaming others, lack being able to take accountability, you're in store for a rude awakening. So I would say if you're sort of one of those employees that's kind of, maybe you didn't start off as a not productive, highly utilized employee, but you've been in the rut, you've been discouraged. Now you're sort of in this I can't do anything stage for the last 10 or 12 months. I would shape up and get ready to fire yourself back up when a fractional CMO is coming to your organization, because they are going to be able to start to create those waves that you can ride in terms of what you believe the organization needs to do. And if you are the typical full-time employee that wants to drive change, but you're just limited by current constraints, I would say welcome aboard. The role is about to become truly what is needed at the organization, and you're going to be able to start to drive change and impact, not just from a vanity perspective, but being able to stay nimble in the sense of if you were, let's just say, the social media manager again here, and you're really just focusing on community management, responding to DMs, going on certain hashtags, replying to comments on other thought leadership posts, you may still be doing some of those roles, but seeing where the impact is lying is where your role is going to be. So it's sort of that Pareto principle. if you as an employee know what 20% of your work is driving 80% of the impact on your month-to-month sort of utilization, you're probably going to be doing a lot more of that 20%.
And Neeti, how about you as the employee? What changes are you looking at that you can expect to see, or what should you be thinking about job-wise or career-wise? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of organizations that lack marketing leadership but have a team in place, that team is being expected, like Alexander said, to do 10 things outside of their job description, right? I recently heard this term, a marketing armchair expert, where you don't really have marketing backgrounds, but you think you know how to do marketing. And so without a leader, you're going directly to your social media manager and saying, hey,
right.
I saw them, our competitor was doing this on LinkedIn. We should try that. Or, even the CFO will have opinions about what to do for marketing. And so a lot of these teams, when you come in, or I like to say they're dusting, but they're not really cleaning, right? They're doing a lot of different things, but nothing is really working extremely well or together. And so the one thing that I usually do is really understand what is actually working and what is just noise and extra kind of things that they are expected to do. And with that focus, though, does come accountability. And so for a lot of these team members who have been working really hard but not really able to show great progress or great impact, when you go from working on 10 different things, it's kind of understandable that you're not going to be able to show the impact. When you get down to 2 things, you better be able to show, in a week, what did you accomplish? How did that impact the business? What are your challenges if you weren't able to make progress? How can we overcome any barriers to your success? And so I do think that there's a level of accountability that perhaps they didn't have before that will be expected of them once a fractional CMO comes in.
Okay. And Neeti, I think this will be our last question, and I will go back to Alexander after. So imagine that your friend is not a fractional CMO. Your friend is a CEO who's just about to hire a fractional CMO. It's not you. Apparently, you're not that good of a friend. And it says, hey, should I be thinking about this fractional CMO and this sort of engagement? Should I be thinking about this as a marathon or a sprint? Should this have a finish line and I know where that is? Or should it be sort of something that goes on a really long time?
So my advice to a friend who is a CEO would be establish a finish line. And it really should be a sprint. I think the benefit of having a fractional CMO come in is that you can hit the ground running. You can start to make progress from day one. You have a playbook that's tried and true, and you can start to make progress very quickly. I think the way Mosaic works is we come in, we do an assessment, and then we put a 90-day plan in place.
Right.
90-day plan that addresses really the lowest hanging opportunities, builds the infrastructure to allow you to continue scaling, and really just focuses on delivering some momentum. And then we'll meet with the CEO and we'll say, we can stay on a little bit longer and help you from an advisory capacity, but you should really start thinking about what full-time marketing leadership looks like, whether that's a CMO or director of marketing. I think the other benefit to having a fractional CMO and having it be a sprint is that you can then validate what type of leader you're looking for or what type of leader your organization needs based on the insights that that fractional CMO is able to get in the first 90 days. And then you can hone your search a little bit more clearly and be more successful. Because the last thing you want to do is hire a CMO and then 6 months later you realize you hired the wrong one and you're back to square one. So I definitely believe in sprint. I also think it's more fair to your organization and your team to hire a full-time CMO that has the bandwidth and has the ability to really invest in their future and in their professional development. I think similar to Alexander, it's something I'm passionate about, so I try to do anyway, but it's not really what's expected of a fractional CMO, and I just think having that full-time person there is really important in the long run.
And Alexander, you're not as good a friend as you thought. CEO didn't hire you, hired someone else, but wants you to give him advice or her advice on should I think about this as a sprint? Or should I think about this as a marathon?
So coming back to your initial question, right? It's about aligning on what is a sprint and what is a marathon for each specific company and what their targets are. But definitely there should be a finish line. I think, in terms of what we get to set up, we do a minimum of a 6 months. So essentially 2 quarters to be able to see what the fruits of the labor of the change really start to ripen into. So about 1 quarter is prep, strategy, development, and starting to implement some of the changes for the newer innovative approaches. But of course, in those first 90 days, like Neeti was saying, you're really just collecting that low hanging fruit, but starting to plant the seedlings for the next tree that's going to grow that will have better fruit for that business, so to speak. But in terms of what the next quarter looks like after the first 3 months are done, it's building in that infrastructure. But for all engagements that I'm a part of, we do fixed start date, fixed end date. And then once that end date is reached, we drop our cadence of contact, or better said, is a reduction of allocated hours. Right. From an engaged perspective to what Neeti was saying, which is basically an advisory perspective. It's my belief that if you're a fractional CMO and the engagement should not run for too long, because if it remains in perpetuity at that point, you're not fractional, you're completely integral at that point. And then layering into that, we normally have the sort of engaged phase, which will be 6 months, 2 quarters. Then we'll stay on as an advisor if it's required for the next 6 months. So at that point, we're doing a full year. Then after a year of working with an organization, we don't want to be advisory or even fully engaged, because at that point, the real value of a fractional CMO is you're getting this knowledge from outside your institution and you're embedding them in your institution. So the goal should be to spread that knowledge, make it institutionalized. So then at that point, you don't need to hire another expert to bring them back in, where it's just a part of the team that was there. So from that point, after a year of working with an organization, if they still need support, if they are still sort of in their search of hiring a CMO and just need something in the background to kind of help them, or sometimes they're just afraid, they have a fear of letting go because this individual brought us so much growth, and I'm hesitant that if we let go, we're just going to return back to our old habits, our old ways, and we need this individual to just keep us accountable, almost like just a coach at that point, like just keep us on track. We'll move to essentially an annual marketing plan meeting or workshop, if you will, and then we'll just set up quarterly meetings for progress assessments and what else should be happening. But again, the true value of a CMO, in my belief, is creating that institutional knowledge and skill set that's going to allow the organization to lead itself, as opposed to constantly needing an external leader to come in.
So, Alexander, as we wrap up, like, what kind of companies should be contacting you, and how should they contact you?
Yeah, so any company that is looking to sort of diversify their acquisition strategy and basically streamline their business model with a digital first approach. So the way they can contact me is, you can find me on LinkedIn, Alexander Ferenczi, not a very common name, so I should be one of the first search queries that pop up. And then if you wanted to book a call or set up a direct sort of, want to fill out our contact form as opposed to just sending us a DM, you could go over to advocacy.com, which is displayed right here along my name. Reach out. Essentially, the way we work is we'll have an initial discovery call. If it seems like a right fit, we'll send over an intake form, get a proposal started, and then we'll get the ball rolling from there.
And Neeti, who should be contacting you, and how should they contact you?
Yes, we work with, like I mentioned in the start, private equity-backed B2B SaaS companies. A lot of companies who have just recently received their funding and have been obviously very successful getting from A to B, but now are expected to grow from B to C and will need a much more deliberate marketing-driven approach that's scalable and predictable should contact Mosaic. And that's where we really spend a lot of our time, is helping companies make that transition from kind of a product-led or sales-led growth model to one that really leverages marketing to achieve a whole new level of growth. So, and to get in touch, you can go to our website, which has a form on it, or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Be happy to chat with anyone and see if perhaps Mosaic can help unlock some of that growth potential.
All right. Thank you both so much. This has been great. I really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, for watching. I'm Dean Way at winstonwrites.com. See you in the next episode.